Hello everybody and welcome back to the third part of my Hugo Winners project. Now for anybody who hasn't seen the other two, I'll just give you a brief idea of what's going on here. Back in the 1960s, 70s, early 80s, my main hobby was reading science fiction. And at that time I read a lot, but it was mainly short stories. I seem to get on with those better. And just recently I've been getting back into reading science fiction in a big way and collecting stuff that I used to have. And I thought, okay, we'll start with novels because, I haven't read enough novels really. I read a few back in the day, but not enough. So I thought, well, what better place to start than with the novels that won the Hugo Award, which is like the premier science fiction accolade, if you like. So what I'm doing is from 1953, when they started onwards, I'm giving my daughter a date and she's picking out a date for me, and I'm reading the book from that particular date. If it's a book I haven't got or one that I've read, we just jump on until we find one. So that's a bit of background to what this is all about. Okay, so we'll jump in. I've only got two books for you today because I want to speak a bit more at length about these than I have been, and just want to point out that these are not reviews. I don't do reviews, but just my impressions, my thoughts about the book in question. Okay, now today we have Ringworld. Memory serves, I think this won the Hugo Award back in 1972, written by Larry Niven. Now this is quite a difficult one for me to give impressions about because it's what's known as a hard science fiction book. And to be quite honest, I've always stayed away from these because I've read a few hard short stories and I never really got on with them. So just to give you a little bit of context about what hard science fiction represents, I'll just give you a brief history of science fiction as pertaining to the 1960s. Now the heyday of science fiction was during the pulp era of the 40s and 50s, very popular. And then there was a little lull back end of the 50s, early 60s. But with the advent of mass paperbacks, it became more popular. And basically back then you had four subgenres, just to simplify it. You had four subgenres of science fiction. You had the swords and sorcery fantasy, stuff like Elric, Michael Moorcock, Dragonflight, Anne McCaffrey. To give it a modern context, you would think of Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, Witcher, stuff like that. And they were quite popular at the time. Then you had your basic science fiction, your science fiction that had been going for many years. You're talking first contact stories, time travel, space operas, stuff like that. And think Star Trek, Star Wars, Battlestar Galactica, all that stuff, Then you had New Kid on the Block, which came in early 60s, which was the New Wave. Now the New Wave was a more hard-edged kind of SF, and it tried to advance SF as a literary concern. Try and make it more literary. And you had people like Michael Moorcock was the main poster boy for it. And you had people like Brian Aldiss, and in America you had people like Thomas Dish, Hal Nellison's very well were thought of anthologies, Dangerous Visions, Dangerous Visions. They were kind of thought of as the cutting edge of new wave. And then you had hard science fiction. Now, best way I could describe it is hard science fiction. It deals with scientific principles, real or imagined. Really, to my mind, you need to be a scientist to understand. And so it was with Ringworld. So that gives you a little bit of idea of where hard science fiction stood in the pantheon of science fiction. Now, I find this a very hard one, as I said, to give my impressions on, because I don't really have anything to compare it with. I've purposely stayed away from books like this. Excuse me. And basically, this is a story of 4 disparate individuals. 2 of them are Terran, 2 of them alien, who go on this this quest to find something. It all got a bit blurry to me, but anyway, you had a character called Louis Wu is the principal protagonist, and tagging along he had Teela, I think her name was, who was his sometimes girlfriend. It was a more promiscuous society. You had an alien called Nessus, who was a puppeteer. And the puppeteers run through Larry Niven's other sort of like Tales of Known Space, I think he was famous for, quite a long series. And then you had another one called Speaker to Animals, I think it was. The puppeteers, by the way, were a cowardly race, and the Speaker was more of a came from a more warlike race. And these went off to look for some ship. And they came across this Ringworld. It was a huge construct, millions of miles in diameter, and it rotated around our sun, much like we do around our sun. And it was a story, basically, they crash landed on it, and it was still basically a story of them trying to find a civilization or people that could help them mend the ship and get back off. I think that's enough I can tell you without getting too spoilery, because I like to keep these impressions spoiler-free wherever possible. And my impressions of the book were quite mixed, actually. I didn't mind it as a narrative, as a story, although it was fairly one note, not much, apart from meeting the various alien cultures on this Ringworld. It was a bit one note, but what kind of turned me off was all the scientific stuff, all the descriptions of space drives and various other things, the jargon, in other words. So it was kind of a difficult balancing act for me to make in my mind. And I would imagine, I can't see where it won the Hugo Award, because I would imagine the panel would have to be a bunch of scientists to get the most out of it. So I had very mixed feelings about it. It wasn't the greatest writing that I've come across in science fiction, to be honest. Larry Niven, I've read a few short stories of his, but none of his novels. So at the end of the day, if I were going to mark it, I would give it maybe 7.5, because it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. You know, I got some enjoyment out of it because of the characters. So there you have it. It would have been higher, but for all the jargon, you know, I probably would have given it 8.5. So yeah, I won't be reading too many hard science fiction books in the near future. As I used to say on Monty Python, now for something completely different. And this is To Your Scattered Bodies Go, Philip Jose Farmer. Now this is the first of the River World series, which I think spanned 4 books. I think. I've certainly got 4. I don't think there are any more. And the premise of this book, now it's going to be difficult for me to give you a lot of information without spoilers here, so I'll tread carefully. The premise of this book is that everybody who ever died is resurrected on this riverbank of this enormous river, millions of miles long apparently. Now, the question that you've got to try and work out in this book is whether they were resurrected to start a new society on a different planet or whatever, or whether they were a scientific experiment. I won't tell you any more than that, but the story follows the main protagonist. I mean, there are proper people from history in this story and others, but the main protagonist is a chap called Sir Richard Burton. Sorry if the light seems a bit dim, I've just lost the sunlight. And it's about him, basically him trying to find the source of the river, hoping he can find out something about what's going on. And during the course of this, he meets various people. There's Alice Hargreaves, who apparently was the basis for Alice in Wonderland. Hermann Goering, a strange character in this, and yeah, it's just about his travels, who he meets, trying to work out what the heck's going on. Now, it was completely different to the other book because I find Philip Jose Farmer quite easy to read. I've read a couple of his novels previously, and quite a few of his short stories actually. He has a very famous one in Dangerous Visions called Riders of the Purple Wage, which is a riff on Riders of the Purple Sage, which I think was a Western, I believe. I have read it, but it's a bit complicated. So yeah, I mean, my impressions of the book were that it was an interesting idea, very, very well written, as I say, easy to read, no problems there. The characters were quite interesting, and I would recommend it to say to anybody who hasn't read a lot of science fiction, to be quite honest. But to those of you who are familiar with science fiction and haven't read it, I think you should put it down as a to be read, certainly. And as I say, I can't tell you too much more about it because I'll be entering into spoiler territory. So yeah, I mean, it's a shorter video, but I thought I would just, I wanted to do them because they were both fairly fresh in my mind. And I thought it would be easier just to do the 2 rather than wait till I'd read another one, which might be a bit longer, and hold it up by another week. I have started another book at the moment, so hopefully I'll be with you with some more of these in in a week and a half, 2 weeks. Yeah, so I'm hoping these are interesting. Any of you who are into science fiction, or indeed those of you who are not familiar. So as usual, I will thank you all for watching, for subscribing. Please continue to send comments, especially, and share it if you can. That would be great. I don't know what's coming up next, but it might be another one of these. It might be something completely different. So thank you very much again, and I will see you very shortly. Bye bye now.